Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. We've done a few episodes now about all kinds of interesting side hustles. But today, we're going to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the whole gig economy thing. So we've got a bunch of sources to dig into for this one, articles, excerpts from some guides, even a YouTube video analysis. We're going to tackle some pretty big questions today. Like, is the gig economy really all it's cracked up to be? How's it changing like the regular job market? And is this like the future of work for everyone, whether we like it or not?
It's interesting because the gig economy, it's not just like a theory or whatever. It's definitely changing how we work and live and even just like the way we think about the future.
Okay, so let's break this down. Our gig economy guide defines it as a labor market that's like built on freelance and flexible jobs. Basically, we're saying goodbye to the old 9 to 5 and hello to, short-term contracts and project-based work. I mean, does that sound right to you? Have you noticed this shift happening out in the real world?
The numbers definitely show a big shift. The guide actually mentions that freelancing jumped from 24% in 2018 to 40% just 4 years later in 2022. So it's not just like a small trend or anything. It's a pretty major change in how we think about work.
40%.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Mm.
So the guide also talks about the pros and cons. And obviously one of the biggest appeals is the flexibility and freedom.
Right.
It's that whole be your own boss, set your own hours thing, which the Wisecrack video also talked about.
Yeah.
But how much of that is like actually real versus just, a good sales pitch, especially after what happened with the whole 2008 recession?
Yeah, a lot of people were looking for a new way to make money after that. And the gig economy kind of promised that, like an escape from the traditional job market. But the guide is honest about the downsides too. Like the income can be really up and down, which makes things like budgeting and planning really difficult. And then, of course, you don't get any benefits. No health care or paid time off or anything like that.
It really makes you think, is the freedom and flexibility worth all that risk? The Wisecrack video had that crazy statistic about DoorDashers only making like $1.45 an hour before tips. That doesn't exactly screen easy money.
Definitely not. I think it shows how important it is to really understand the gig economy. It can seem really appealing, but you have to look beyond that and really think about the potential downsides.
Totally. So who are the big players in this whole gig economy world? The guide mentions platforms like Uber and Airbnb and Upwork. It seems like tech companies are kind of running the show, connecting workers with these different gigs.
That's a really good point. These platforms aren't just neutral. They have all these rules and algorithms and fees that have a big impact on how gig workers actually do their jobs and what they earn. They control who gets the opportunities and basically set the terms of everything, which brings up questions about fairness and transparency.
So it's not just about finding a gig. It's about navigating this whole complex system where the platform has a ton of power.
Tired of scrolling through endless workout videos and confusing money-making schemes? Fit4Funds.com is your one-stop destination for reliable fitness equipment guides and proven side hustle strategies. From foam rollers to freelancing, we break down what actually works. No fluff, just practical tools to build your body and bank account. Visit Fit4Funds.com today, where fitness meets financial freedom.
And the Fit4Funds article had some real-world examples of that, like driving for Uber or Lyft or delivering for DoorDash or Instacart. It's so easy to get started with these platforms. But what about the legal stuff and taxes?
Yeah.
The guide mentions that contract work and taxes and worker rights can be really complicated.
Right, and the Fit for Funds article emphasizes how important worker classification is. Like, are you an employee or an independent contractor? Because that makes a huge difference in your rights and benefits. And remember that whole thing in California with Prop 22 that the Wisecrack video talked about? Uber and other companies spent so much money fighting against classifying their drivers as employees.
Yeah, it was crazy how much they fought against that. So let's talk about success in the gig economy. Is that even possible? The guide lays out some steps, like building a strong portfolio and marketing yourself and networking. It seems pretty straightforward. But the Wisecrack video also mentioned that the market is getting really crowded. As more people join the gig economy, the competition gets tougher, and it's harder to stand out and find consistent work. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really important point. It's not enough to just be good at what you do. You have to be able to market yourself and build a network. And as the gig economy keeps growing, that's going to become even more important.
So it's like you need a whole new set of skills on top of your actual expertise. You have to be an entrepreneur and a marketer and a networker.
Exactly. And that's where a lot of people struggle. They might be really talented, but they don't have the business skills to succeed in this kind of environment. It's definitely challenging. And you have to be willing to constantly learn and adapt. It's like the Wild West out there right now with everybody trying to get their piece of the pie. But the whole landscape is changing so fast.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what's next. What's the future of the gig economy? The guide talks about some trends, and it sounds like it's just going to keep growing. Whatis.com and Investopedia both predict continued growth, especially with remote work getting so popular. And all these specialized platforms popping up for all kinds of niche skills. Plus now there's even AI-driven job matching. It really feels like this is just the beginning of a huge shift in how we work.
Oh, it's definitely not going away anytime soon. And then there's that Mercer study that the Wisecrack video mentioned. Apparently, 60% of executives are planning to replace full-time employees with contract workers in the next 3 years. Makes you wonder if your job could be next. How would you feel about that?
Honestly, that's a little scary. It makes me think about what this means for job security and for the future of like traditional employment. Are we all going to be doing gig work whether we want to or not?
It's a valid concern. I mean, the gig economy could completely change entire industries and how we think about work in general. And the Fit for Funds article brings up another important point: sustainability and ethical considerations. We have to think about fair pay and worker rights, and even the environmental impact of this whole gig-driven world.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And the Wisecrack video was pretty critical of gig economy companies. They accuse them of like socializing risk and privatizing return, basically profiting off of workers without giving them any security or support. What do you think about that?
I think it's a fair criticism. The way it works now puts a lot of risk on individual workers. They have to deal with inconsistent income and no benefits, and they often don't have much legal protection. It definitely raises questions about exploitation and whether these platforms have a responsibility to provide a better working environment.
So we've talked about a lot of complex stuff today. It seems like the gig economy is this weird mix of freedom and precarity. There's opportunity, but also a lot of uncertainty. It's changing the way we think about work. But where do we go from here? Can we take advantage of the good parts of the gig economy while also addressing all the challenges?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the Wisecrack video had an interesting suggestion: worker-owned co-ops. They talked about this app called Co-op Ride, which is a ride-sharing platform that's owned by the workers. It's trying to change the power dynamics in the gig economy.
That's pretty cool. Co-op Ride, the worker-owned alternative. It sounds like a pretty radical idea. But maybe that's what we need: a system that actually empowers workers and promotes fairness and sustainability. But is that realistic? Can a model like that really compete with giants like Uber and Lyft?
Well, it's definitely an uphill battle, but I think it's worth fighting for. The fact that Co-op Ride exists and other worker-owned platforms are out there shows that there are alternatives. It's about shifting the focus away from just making profits and towards creating a system that's better for the workers.
So it's not just about individuals trying to make it in the gig economy. It's about changing the whole system to make it more just and beneficial for everyone. But let's be practical for a minute. What do you actually need to do to succeed in this gig-driven world? Our guy talks a lot about building a strong portfolio. It's like your resume, but instead of just listing skills, you're showing actual projects and accomplishments.
Yeah, you need to show people what you can actually do, not just tell them. A good portfolio helps you stand out and attract clients. It shows that you're serious and professional.
Right. It's like saying, hey, look what I can do. I'm not just all talk. But a good portfolio is just the first step. The guide also talks about the importance of marketing. You have to get your name out there and make sure potential clients know who you are and what you can offer.
You have to be your own advocate. Promote your brand. Use social media. Build an online presence. And connect with your audience. It's not enough to just be good. People need to know you're good.
And the Fit for Funds article is all about using those online platforms to your advantage. Create profiles on sites like Upwork and Fiverr, whatever makes sense for your niche. And don't forget about word of mouth. Tell your friends, family, former colleagues about what you're doing. You never know where your next client will come from.
Networking is huge, both online and offline. Go to industry events, join online communities, connect with other gig workers. You can find new opportunities that way, and get support and resources.
Yeah, it's like building a community, sharing knowledge and experience, and helping each other out. But I have to admit, networking can be kind of awkward. How do you do it without feeling like you're just using people?
I think the key is to focus on building genuine relationships, not just trying to get something from people. Connect with people who share your interests, offer support and value, be open to collaborating. It should be mutually beneficial.
That makes sense. It's about finding people who understand what you're going through and who can offer advice and support.
Exactly. It's about creating a sense of community because gig work can be really isolating sometimes.
But let's be real for a second. The gig economy isn't always easy. One of the biggest things we keep coming back to is job security. It's like this constant up and down. One week you have tons of work, and the next you're sitting around waiting for something to come up. How do you handle that kind of uncertainty?
Yeah, it's tough. The Wisecrack video called it precarious work, which I think is a perfect way to describe it. There's no stability. You're always hustling to find the next gig, never knowing how much you're going to make, or if you'll even have work next month.
And the Fit for Funds article talked about how risky it can be to rely on gig work for all your income.
Yeah, it's one thing if you're just doing it on the side, but if it's your only source of income, you're really putting yourself out there.
Especially without any benefits. No health insurance, no paid time off, no retirement plan. It's like you're running your own business. But without any of the safety nets.
Exactly.
And then there's taxes. The guide had a whole section on self-employment taxes.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other beast.
It's not just filing a W-2. You have to keep track of all your income and expenses. And make quarterly payments. It can get really complicated.
It's definitely overwhelming for some people.
Yeah.
Especially if you're new to all this. It's important to stay organized, maybe even talk to an accountant or something, and make sure you're setting aside enough money to cover your taxes. Otherwise, you could be in for a rude awakening come tax time.
Yeah, the IRS is not messing around. But beyond the money stuff, there's also the whole work-life balance thing. It's so easy to just work all the time when you're doing gig work. The lines get blurred between work and personal life.
Yeah, especially if you're working from home. You're always connected. It's hard to switch off.
The Fit for Funds article warned about burnout if you're not careful.
You got to set boundaries. Create a schedule. Take care of yourself if you want to be successful in the long run.
It's all about finding that balance, hustling for gigs, but also protecting your time and energy. So we've talked about the individual challenges, but what about the bigger picture? How is the gig economy affecting traditional jobs?
The Wisecrack video argued that it's actually destroying traditional jobs. It's creating a race to the bottom, where workers are competing for lower wages and fewer benefits. And remember that Mercer study. 60% of executives plan to replace full-time employees with contract workers. It really makes you wonder what the future of work is going to look like.
It's a pretty big shift, and it raises a lot of concerns about job security and worker rights. So where do we go from here? Is the gig economy just going to keep growing like this with all its problems? Or is there a way to make it more fair and sustainable?
Well, the Wisecrack video talked about worker-owned co-ops, like Co-op Ride, as a potential solution.
Right, giving workers more control and ownership.
Yeah, it's a pretty inspiring idea.
It shows that there are other ways to do this. We don't have to just accept the way things are. We can demand better working conditions and fairer compensation. We can fight for a better future of work.
Absolutely. We're not just along for the ride. We can actually shape how this all plays out. But we have to be aware, and we have to be critical, and we have to be willing to challenge the status quo.
I think that's a great message to end on. So that's our deep dive into the gig economy. It's a complex topic with a lot of different angles, and we definitely uncovered more questions than answers. But one thing's for sure, the gig economy is here to stay, and it's going to keep changing the way we work.
It's a revolution that's already happening.
And we all need to be part of the conversation.
Think critically, explore the complexities, and imagine a future of work that works for everyone.
Thanks for joining us today. And as always, you can find links to all the sources we talked about in the show notes. Keep learning and keep questioning. Until next time.